The inquiry method is one method, one approach to teaching history, and I suppose it's letting the sources do the talking, doing the storytelling. You ask a series of questions of the sources from which you glean evidence to give you some sort of perspective on the past.
Vanessa?
I think it detracts from the reliability because the journalists that wrote it probably wouldn't even have come in contact with women convicts, just writing from what they've heard.
So we need to know more about the fact that it came from the Queensland government is not enough. We need to know more. So I think it's even a credible source one of the better methods because it really engages the student in the learning activity, and there's a lot of discovery from them as opposed to the teacher just handing it to them, if you like. So they own it more, I think, and that creates that sense of empathy, which is probably the most powerful tool for really getting a love for history, is to really get the feel of what it was like. And the inquiry method, I think, it's great strength because it does that. So our question today will be, how were women convicts treated in the 18th century and why were they treated that way? So we're starting to build... The key question then is the focal point of the activity. It just gives a structure through which you can explore the sources and the evidence that you get from them. Key questions can take a variety of forms. The one we had today was a two-part one, a kind of a how and a why. And the how is often the easy and the why, of course, is more tricky. I'm going to show you an object today. There she is. Okay, who can identify what that is for me? Yes, Sean.
A collar.
A collar. A particular type of collar?
Dog.
A dog collar. Okay. Using objects in history, I think, again, is that bringing it to life aspect and different to the source material in the printed form. Because the collar, for example, is very hands-on. It's very, very tactile, very in your face, very present. So you can ask a whole variety of questions about an object like that. Could you imagine a time when humans would be forced to wear something like this? Could you think of a scenario where humans would be forced to be collared like a dog? Ben?
Maybe in a torture chamber.
Maybe in a torture chamber, right?
Convicts to keep them together.
Convicts to keep them together. Very good. And that, in fact, is what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at a time in Australian history when the use of these collars was fairly standard practice, and in particular, a fairly standard practice in restraining women. It's important to start with comprehension, I think, because every student can succeed there. Some of the deeper questioning, some students don't feel as comfortable, so it's good to start with in a way that you engage the student so they feel like, yes, I can do this, I have some knowledge here. What's a weekly ration? What's a weekly ration? Good. Cal?
Is it all that stuff up there?
That's right. But what does it mean? What does a weekly ration actually mean? Yes, Nicole.
Foods they get for the week.
Okay, so it's a food they get for the week. Why is it rationed? Yes, Vanessa.
Because at that time they would have had to ration their food so they didn't run out.
Because?
Because they were on ships.
That's right. And language can be problematic, and if you're talking with senior students, you could get into a much deeper understanding of the role of semantics in the construction of meaning. But with the junior school, it's just as important, but not to the same level, where you have to unpack the meaning of the words. So, for example, the word ferocious that we were looking at for a while, the line of question I was pursuing was, I mean, they understood the meaning, but I wanted them to relate to the focus question. And in what way might that ferocity come out? In other words, if something is excessively ferocious, what's he suggesting about their behaviour? Ben?
Oh, they might be like animals.
Okay. In terms of?
Ferocity.
Yes. And what sort of behaviour would be animal-like?
Barking.
Yes, that's right. Maybe they did bark. We don't know. We'll explore that again another time. But what sort of behaviour, Callum?
They might lash out.
Okay. So physical violence we're talking about? What other types of violence? Physical violence, what else would be suggested? Yep. Verbal, okay. So that they might be swearing, be violent, they are excessively ferocious. Yes.
Baker. In the source it says that the women were drunken and abandoned prostitutes.
Yes, it does.
How would Lord Molesworth been able to make that statement, because they wouldn't have had any access to alcohol or anything?
And
so
who wouldn't have had access to alcohol?
The females.
And the female convicts where?
On the ships.
Okay.
or in the colonies.
Okay, good. Thanks, Nicole. Let's go to the text of the source then, people. Is there anything there that tells us about who Lord Molesworth is talking about? Is he talking about female convicts before they're sent over, on the trip over, in the Australian colony itself? Is there any evidence that we can glean from the text to help us answer Nicole's question? Let's hear we go. Pearl?
He's talking about them in the penal colony.
And how do we know that?
Because he says it down in the
Okay,
sheet.
so that's right. Third from where he says the disproportionate sexes in the penal colonies. Okay, so, all right. And in the penal colonies, as we know, then, alcohol was available. In fact, at one stage there in the rum corps period, alcohol was the main means of currency. So, he's probably referring to that aspect of life in the penal colony. A good question, Nicole. Let's see how we need to engage in a discourse with the text, don't we? With the sources to see what it is exactly they're telling us. We have a look at source C. What does it say at the top there, Hayley Skinner?
From the Journal of Lieutenant Clark, an officer on the First Fleet.
Very good. So we know what an officer is and we know what the First Fleet is. So let's see what he had to say. Lieutenant Clark said this: "I could never have thought there were so many abandoned wenches in England. They are 10,000 times worse than the men convicts, and I'm afraid that we will have a great deal more trouble with them." The author of this source is in a position to know women, convict women. Would you agree?
Yes.
Because what does he do?
On the First Fleet.
Okay, so he'd have direct contact with him, with the female convicts. So therefore his opinion would be accurate, wouldn't it? It would be reliable? Okay. So you're telling me that even though he has first-hand experience of women convicts, that doesn't guarantee objectivity? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me why. What sort of things, what words in the text in particular might give it away that we need to look very closely at this source, at the evidence this source suggests? Okay. Cal?
It says that they're 10,000 times worse.
10,000 times worse. That's a lot, isn't it? If we wrote that on the board, we'd have a lot of zeros there, wouldn't we? Okay. What's that an example of? Sean?
Exaggeration.
Exaggeration, or hyperbole. Very good. Does that add or detract from the reliability of this source, do you think? When we're trying to get evidence from this source, we're asking questions of this source, and it's a statement like 10,000 times worse. Is that going to add or detract from the reliability of it? Vanessa?
Detract.
And why would that be?
Because he's making it really overly strong, that you question it a bit.
So you start with that straight comprehension, and then interpretation and analysis to a certain degree would be the next phase. So a series of questions aimed at getting below the surface meaning. Then you start to move into that sort of synthesis evaluation where they start to draw some threads together. And then finally a decision-making phase where they, in particular, now that can happen on each individual source and it can happen at the end of the lesson. Any teacher will know you can have your lesson plan either written down or in your head, and in you come and you think that you'll have a fair idea of where the lesson will go. But there's always left field questions, and I think they're great. They can throw you sometimes. But I think it's an example that students, when they dialogue with the sources themselves, they start to see things that you don't. Lieutenant Clark, then, as an officer on the First Fleet, was suggesting that he would have first-hand contact with women convicts. But the problem with his source is that he's given away perhaps some of his bias by the fact that he has exaggerated and used an expression like 10,000 times worse, etc. Melissa?
Wasn't there more than one ship on the First Fleet?
Yes, I think there's 11 vessels that made up the First Fleet.
Yeah, so, but how do we know that he was in direct contact with women? He might have been on a ship that didn't have any.
Okay, good question. How do we know? Do we know? Does the source reveal that to us? Have a look. Is there anything there that can...
No.
Okay. So what does Melissa's question add to our little discussion about this source and its reliability? What do we have to factor in? Sean?
Again, detracts.
It could detract because we don't really know. Maybe he was on one of the ships that didn't have female convicts on it. And maybe this is his second-hand opinion, if you like. Yes, Melissa?
He can just be using his natural opinion on women to write this.
Okay, very good. So you can see that when we even look at primary sources and they're written by the hand of someone who was there, it doesn't mean that automatically they are reliable, does it? What you're going to do is you're going to tell me, using that criteria, in your opinion, which is the most valuable. That's the top of our pyramid, the most valuable source. And then if you like, on the second rung, which sources to you are the next most valuable? And then, if you like, which ones are the third level of value in answering our focus question?
When the students ranked the sources in the pyramid structure, it was to get them to think about all those words we've been using again and again, representing this reliability, accuracy,
In a structure like that.
in a way
Are we up
that,
for it?
to them, which was
do
the
it?
most valuable at uncovering the story of the past. So they had to use that criteria to weigh up which gave me the better perspective, or the clearer perspective, I should say, of what I was trying to find out. And what you're trying to find out, of course, was the answer to the focus question. So that's a good little prelim before you move into now answer the question, because it just gives them an idea of, when I'm going to write this paragraph in response to my question, which stuff really spoke most to me. So the inquiry method, I mean, works very well in the classroom for the reasons we discussed before about bringing history to life, for empathy, etc. But it also equips them in life with the ability to discern truth, purpose, meaning. So, I mean, they're going to be bombarded in their adult life with a whole variety of stuff, particularly from the media, and they really need the ability to sift through and see who's pushing what barrow and who's on whose pay packet. And in other words, in getting to truth and meaning, the inquiry method is one of those skills that students need in life in general. I mean, don't we all?